Good day, good afternoon, good evening to all of you all around the world, wherever you are watching this. My name is Unique Argeru, and today I am joined by Regina Huber, a transformational leadership consultant. Now, Regina is a LinkedIn, linked up colleague peer. We've recently met each other and realized we share a great interest in leadership and how to support inclusive leadership. And I want to just tell you a little bit about Regina's portfolio and her background, because she's working on one of the areas that I think is so important in corporates and companies, organizations, how to help them actually think more about inclusivity, how to be inclusive in their leadership processes, and how to actually humanize the workplace. I love those words together, Regina, and you're going to tell us more about it in a minute. So she really developed an interesting style of transformation around leadership. She calls it powerful leadership transformation, and it can be developed with an individual or in an actual organization, because Regina is really highly skilled in coaching diverse clients to advance their careers and consulting organizations and really transform the company by looking a lot more at diversity. So she wants us all to know that there are ways to get more engaged. So if you are thinking of stepping up, you can even look into one of her great products that she's developed, which is a book called Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine. And it teaches us ways on how to engage more when you do actually speak up, stand out, how you can mentally, emotionally, and energetically prepare for challenging situations. And Regina's going to tell us a little bit more about her journey today. Thank you so much for making time, Regina, and welcome all the way from New York, right?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Unique. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board. Always really important to speak with great women that are doing great things for other great women. So you talk about speaking powerfully in any situation in your book, and you yourself have, I imagine by now, spent a really long time working with really difficult situations, challenging environments, and helping people really step into leadership more and more in those environments. Give us a quick idea. What does your average day look like? What do you end up doing in your work day?
Yeah, so my days look very different from day to day. For example, today I'm going to a big event in the afternoon. Networking is a huge part of my work. I want to get this work out to as many women and people in general as possible, of course. So that's a big part of it. In the morning, as I'm doing an interview with you, and also, of course, some creative work. I'm working on a new program, which should be out soon, and also on a mastermind that I will be promoting soon. It's called Succeed Through Purpose. And the next week, my days will look very, very different. I'll be traveling to Maryland to teach 4 sessions on a topic that is called patronizing versus advocating. And this is for a group of a very, very diverse group of people at all levels. I'm very excited about this. And lots of travel. I just came back from South Africa, where I was speaking at a conference by Female Wave of Change, which I'm a member of. I was also speaking to a group of students at the University of Johannesburg, and to another group of mostly students, but also other people at a at a research center for data science. And this was more focused really on diversity and inclusion and diverse and inclusive practices in technology. And this was a presentation that I did together with a partner for this topic. So every day is really unique and different. Of course, I have my private coaching clients that I interact with. So I have a few of those sessions tomorrow. That's what my work is about.
Wonderful. And you hit on some really sweet spots for me. South Africa is where I'm from. So I know diversity inclusion is a big conversation in South African business contexts and generally in all decision-making policy. All of this really, how do you include minority voices, is also a deep study area for me. So I really want to just honor what you're doing, and that you put this information out to places like that, and also just let people know that there is a lot of advanced perception, I would say, and insight that comes into being able to assist people to do that, like you're doing. So it's really great to hear that you're moving around quite a lot with this information. And I also wonder how the journey has been for you to actually arrive at this place in your life as a woman, taking on your own choice to shine and really doing that, you know. So can you tell us maybe one kind of breakthrough moment that you've had in your life that you're happy to share with a strange audience like us, maybe, that actually taught you something? So maybe you can tell us what it was, and then what did you learn from that, so we can also track a little bit of your own wisdom that you've gathered.
I will definitely do that. I'm happy to share. Before we go into this, though, so people understand a little bit more about why I do this diversity and inclusion work, because, you know, oftentimes people ask, oh, you're a white woman, how did you even get into this, right? So nowadays, I lead a diversity and inclusion roundtable here in New York, and I wrote a white paper last year. And what brought me to this is really my deep curiosity for how people think, live, for how they dance. I love dancing, right? So I have a huge curiosity for cultures and for differences. This has always attracted me. Even as a little girl, I grew up on a small farm in a small village, and there was not a lot of diversity, but I was always curious and adventurous, which drove me out into the world. And then I lived in several different countries on different continents, a long time also in Latin America, a total of 8 years, Brazil, Argentina. I've traveled a lot through Latin America. I lived in Spain, lived on the west coast of the US. And lately, as we just mentioned, I have spent also more time on the African continent, South Africa, Cameroon, Ghana, and I'm planning to possibly go to Uganda soon and other places, right? So I'm very, very keen on learning. I've worked with Nigerian women. I've worked with women from Qatar lately. So it's super enriching. Every time I learn just as much as these women or people, I've worked a lot with youth as well, learn from me. So this is sort of the gist of why I do what I do. And my background is very, very eclectic. I've already mentioned that I've lived in several different places. I've studied different languages, which also is enriching because it gives us insight in how people think and how they and how they express their ideas. And yes, I've had quite a few challenging situations in my life. I was very, very lucky to call it something, to be catapulted into a leadership position very early on in my life, although I didn't even have relevant background, at the Boston Consulting Group in Madrid. And I was also blessed to move with the Boston Consulting Group sorry, my voice, to several different places, open offices for them. But then later on, I decided to go ahead and move on my own. And I had my businesses in Argentina and Brazil, and that was quite challenging at times, especially as a foreign woman. There's a lot of corruption I would say in all countries. But in some countries, you have to live with it more on a daily basis, especially as a business owner. And that was challenging. Starting in Argentina, where I owned a bed and breakfast and had to deal with corrupt authorities. I won actually a lawsuit against the city of Buenos Aires, which I'm pretty proud of.
Wow, that's quite an accolade, yeah.
Yes, and then I moved to Brazil, had my own business there again, and that's where the real challenge came. And today, I have to say it was a blessing, because in hindsight, it really pushed me to do what I'm doing now and what I do professionally now. And it was an extremely challenging experience with a business partner, very painful. It didn't only cost me a lot of money, my business and my entire fundament of living in Brazil. It also cost me at the time my self-esteem. And so I had to really build that back from scratch, from zero, just about 8 years ago. And that's also how the book eventually came about, because I needed some tools that helped me through this challenging situation. I moved from Brazil to New York, had to build a new network, totally from scratch. I hardly knew anybody here. The people I knew were very busy and constantly traveling. They didn't really have time to connect me with other people. So I've built this huge network here, offline and online. And in the meantime, my online network has spread out all the way, all over the world, especially also Africa, the African continent. And not only online, but also offline. So I've really connected. I've made a point of connecting in person with people, whether it's on video or through travel. And that's really what's built this practice. So when I came here, I said, okay, what am I going to do with all of these different pieces of my previous experience and skills and talents? And I also love dance, so I've really developed a deep knowledge of energy and body. And then I pulled all of this together with my holistic studies. I know you are very deep into psychology, so I studied the subconscious mind through holistic studies. I went into neuroscience, probably not as deeply as you, but I have a deep interest for it, and have applied all of this into my own growth. And from there, I learned how to also teach it, or pass it on, I should say, to other women specifically, but also just other people who have an interest in their personal growth, and in a way to transform this growth into professional growth.
Beautiful. So when you had these really challenging times with your business partner, and then again, and one is out, is there was something else challenging there, what did you realize at that moment? What was the insight that you got out of those moments before reinventing yourself?
Mm-hmm. There were a couple of things. First of all, I realized that at the time when I partnered up with that person, I was not deeply listening to my intuition. I was not connected to my heart decisions. I was being very analytical, a little bit maybe also fearful, because I'd always done everything, it seemed, in my life mostly by myself. I'd moved everywhere by myself, built my living base by myself, and it seemed almost as if there was this person who could accelerate this, who could help me, but I didn't really need that help. I just didn't trust myself enough maybe at the time. I didn't want to go through that corruption spiel again by myself. It was just the easy way out to have somebody by my side. So I didn't really listen, didn't take the time to listen into my intuition, say, is this really the right partner? Is this really the right option for me? And the second thing is, after it happened, I learned that I needed to move out of my victimhood into a self-empowered mindset. That was a process, of course. Don't do that from one day to the next. But there was a moment when I realized this. And gladly, I had studied holistic practices, which helped me through this process. And I also had friends who practiced these and who helped me. I'm very grateful for them. And once I made that step, I was going upward again. Slowly at first. It was quite an effort at first, I have to admit, because I also had to clean up all the mess that was related to this business, right? It was a brick and mortar business. I had to sell everything, to go through this painful process. And it took a while, but once I was moving in the right direction, I could rebuild. So I could rebuild my confidence, my self-esteem. I could take responsibility for the experience without blaming myself, without feeling guilty, just acknowledging that it was a very important stepping stone and growth factor and lesson in my life. And, nowadays I can look back and I can look at that person as a teacher. I have learned to forgive not only the person, but myself, because that's the harder part.
Yes, absolutely.
I really now look back and say, okay, this person came into my life as one of my biggest teachers and one of my most important teachers. And he is why I do what I do now, to a certain extent at least.
Fantastic. Really powerful teaching, to have set up businesses and to have been in other countries, and then to have to reinvent yourself again and again. And I think this teaching of intuition is so important. Thank you for highlighting it. If we move now to the next question I want to ask you, which is this little girl that you were once and this really capable, resourceful woman that you've become, and now in New York, you know, there's a lot of reputation about New York being the place where, you know, dreams come true. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So I commend you on taking on that challenge and knowing that you've accomplished that as a woman of today. When you think back to this younger person that you were when you were a young girl, what kind of advice would you give her about the world?
The advice I would give her is to trust herself more. And I think I was at times a little bit self-limiting, but when there were opportunities, I did take them because of my adventurous spirit. That was just something innate inside of me. And, you know, I didn't have a lot of information also at the time about my opportunities, my possibilities, because there was no internet. My parents didn't know that much about all the possibilities that were out there for us. But they always let us do, and I really commend them for that, what we wanted. So they never restricted us in any way. They allowed us to make our own choices. Yeah. So that's something really precious. I did venture out. I moved to Munich at 19. Then I was always looking. I knew that I wanted to move abroad. Not that all the opportunities came through right away, but I did start working with the Boston Consulting Group with that in mind. And eventually it worked out in a different direction. So I'd always wanted to come to New York or to go to the West Coast of the US because I'd studied English and French and all that. But when the opportunity came to move to Spain, I said, okay, I can learn Spanish, and I went. Although I did not have any relationship with Spain at the time at all. So it just was, you know, meant to be. And then I moved from there to other places.
Yeah, a real adventurous spirit.
Open. Yeah.
To trust more. And looking back now, you've traveled a journey as a woman. It sounds like being very resourceful, taking care of your own needs yourself as much as you could. Mm-hmm. And now I know you work a lot with women as well. So knowing your journey as a woman and knowing all these women that you work with, I'm going to ask you the question that really inspired me to do these interviews, which is, mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest lie that women believe? And what is the truth?
The biggest lie that women believe is that they have to be empowered by others. The truth is no one can empower you but yourself. That's the truth. And yes, we need resources. I'm not saying we don't. We all do. We need equal access to resources because men have had traditionally more access to more resources. But that's not the same as empowerment. I always like to say you need to learn a way to self-empower. The power is already inside of you. We just really need to tap into it, connect with it, trust that you have it. And we need some tools sometimes that help us do that. And some of those tools are in the book, but of course we can also go much deeper and practice. This is an everyday practice. It doesn't stop tomorrow. So we need to build this power and trust that we have all we need inside of us. Also, connected with this is to really the practice of uncovering your unique brilliance and genius, because that's another thing we all have. We are all different for a reason. And that's why I've built it into my system, Powerful Leadership Transformation. So as I call it, distinctive uniqueness, you have it. Your self-empowering mindset and a body and energy conscious presence. So when I go speak, people always say, oh, we have this special energy. We like your energy. Well, that requires a little bit of work, but that is related to this self-empowerment principle. It's all included in it.
Fantastic. I agree with every single thing you said, Regina. And always like to hear that distinction, that there is something we have to do, that it doesn't actually just come from outside or waiting for permission, which I think is some of the struggle. When you look at the movements of women gathering around the world, is there anything you'd like to add to that conversation or something you would like to comment about that? I know there's many events all around Europe where we are here, and I'm sure in New York and the US, just the same. I've been to many there as well. So I see it as a worldwide collective movement of all women mobilizing for change. What would you add to that conversation, or what do you think about all of that?
Well, I think, I want to be part of movements that are really active and proactive. There are a lot of women's organizations that are there, but they don't really require their members to have a proactive role. Me personally, I prefer to have a proactive role. So I used to be, for example, a member of the Financial Women's Association here in New York for 2 years. And while I was a member, I had a very active leadership role in the leadership team. And I was a co-chair of one of the committees and then of another committee. So when I noticed that I wanted to have another active role in a different organization, I paused this membership because it doesn't make sense to me to be a member of something that I cannot have an active role. I have a business, so I have to be mindful in how I apply my time. Mm-hmm. Right now, I have a very active role in the Female Wave of Change organization. And I'm also collaborating with other organizations actively. But I really think it's important that we also propagate, or maybe that's not the right word, but live and experience the feminine values through these organizations. Yes, it's what we need more of. It doesn't mean that the masculine values don't have value, but we already have a lot of that, so we need to bring more of that feminine value into the conversation and into the world to achieve greater balance. And I want to be a part of this. And when an organization offers me that opportunity because of what they stand for and how they move along, then I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, beautiful. So important for us to step up more into being active and actually have some alignment, like I think you're saying, about how we actually live into these organizations, the principles and the ethics and the values that we really believe in, not to just be talking about them, but to actually be working them through. I remember I had to practice that recently, where I had somebody collaborating with me on a project, and then she didn't want to collaborate anymore, and then it turned into a kind of competitive type situation. And I had to work again on myself and with others. It was quite a difficult process to see if I could turn that competitive situation into, again, a collaboration. And we did manage to actually collaborate. So I think it's so important what you say, and maybe we all need a lot of help to also find the ways to be more in integrity with how to live these values, different to what we've learned from the whole patriarchal, masculinized way of doing things. But also so great to hear that that's something that maybe if we needed some help to articulate, we could always call on you, because you have a nice way of speaking about it. And I'm moving now to the real place of change, where I would really like to welcome people to listen in on how they can use your services, or how they can actually enjoy what it is that you have to offer in different ways. So could you just give us a quick idea of 3 words that you think are absolutely useful and powerful for people to remember you and your wisdom?
Yes. So one is related to what you just mentioned, and it's co-creation. I believe that we need to move much more from competition to co-creation. And I personally believe that there is no healthy competition. I don't believe in monopoly, but that's not the same. So co-creation is really, really important. It's something we need to practice. It's based on the principle that we're all unique for a reason, and I don't have what you have, so it makes sense to work together and to come together and create something bigger together than we could create on our own. So that's a really important word for me, co-creation.
Yeah.
Inclusiveness, of course. We talk so much about diversity and inclusion in corporations and in organizations, but oftentimes we silo people out too much. So I actually believe we have to transcend our current practices. The so-called affinity groups have a role. They give individuals a voice within a group, but I do I do want to point out that we need to transcend our current practices and think about next practices, not just best practices so far, but we need to now move on to next practices. So greater inclusiveness. And then I also think that we need to really rethink the way we talked about empowerment and self-empowerment earlier, right? So really rethink the way we want to help others. I think the help needs to be, the word help needs to be replaced with respect.
Right.
You know, when I just read a newsletter again this morning by a well-intentioned person who said, men want to help women. I think, no, it's not about that. I think we need to start at a different level. Men need to respect what women need and want. It's not so much, oh, I need your help, I need your respect.
Right. So
respect, co-creation, and inclusiveness.
Inclusiveness. And tell us, where can people find you, Regina Huber?
Yes, of course. My website is transformyourperformance.com. So again, that's transformyourperformance.com. I'm on LinkedIn as Regina Huber, and I'm also on Facebook with a page that's called Transform Your Performance. I have a Twitter account under Transform Dance, which is aligned with my passion of dancing. And I have my book, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine on Amazon. I will be promoting a mastermind soon, which is called Succeed Through Purpose. And I very much look forward to it. It is specifically for women who want to gain a stronger a deeper understanding of their purpose and really move into it with more conviction and more determination. And yeah, I think that's it. So I offer coaching, private coaching programs, workshops, and speaking, of course. I do a lot of speaking engagements on different topics, which are also listed on my website, transformyourperformance.com. There's a lot of information.
We love this dancing inclusion. I myself was a dancer. I would love people to learn more about the flow and really connecting it to leadership is genius. Thank you for sharing all your wonderful wisdom with us today. We will put all these links onto your bio, onto this video, so anybody who wants to know more about you and what you're doing can find you. So everybody out there, really think a little bit more about how you can actually speak up, stand out, and shine, that it's your choice to do this. It's your empowerment, that you take the decision to actually empower yourself and not wait for others and not believe that it's outside of you, that this has to happen. Make sure you are getting the right resources and that you are activating more resource building in your communities and in your environments, as we are all doing, for all people to have access. But remember, it's from within, and remember that you have heard this from Regina Huber, who also gives us these great 3 words, closing out with these great 3 words of inclusivity, co-creation, and respect. Thank you so much, Regina. Lovely to have you with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Helenique. It's been really lovely.
Great. Bye.
Bye.